2012, Alaskan law enforcement came face to face with perhaps one of this country's most prolific serial killers. His name is Israel Keyes.
This is one of the most cunning serial killers of all time, caught by a simple mistake that will go on to reveal the true depths of his depravity.
He was the type of offender who makes people disappear without a trace.
Even after capture, he showed no remorse for his heinous crimes, ranging from kidnapping to brutal murder by his method of choice, strangulation.
I almost feel guilty. The problem is nowadays, the more stuff my name is attached to, the more likely it is that somebody's going to try to do some kind of stupid frickin' TV special, or you know how it is nowadays, like all this true crime bullshit that people are obsessed with.
Today, we'll be talking about the serial killer who traveled across the country for over a decade, terrorizing small towns, helpless individuals and families, while maintaining a double life that no one was able to see through for years.
Who is Israel Keyes?
Israel Keyes was born in Richmond, Utah on January 7, 1978. He was born into a large, deeply religious family that adhered to strict fundamentalist Christian beliefs. John and Heidi Keyes were devout followers of the Christian identity movement, a white supremacist religious ideology that viewed other races as inferior. Their dedication to their religion bordered on cult-like. The Keyes family lived off the grid, isolated from mainstream society, which played a significant role in shaping Israel's sick, twisted worldview. The Keyes family moved frequently during Israel's early years, relocating from Utah to Colville, Washington, and eventually settling in an isolated cabin deep in the woods. Living without modern amenities, the Keyes children grew up learning survival skills, hunting, and self-sufficiency, but also in a culture that reinforced rigid and often extremist ideologies. This deeply entrenched belief system permeated every aspect of Israel's upbringing, cultivating an environment in which violence, control, and domination were seen as acceptable, even righteous behaviors. By the time he was a teenager, Keyes was already exhibiting signs of antisocial behavior. He was a loner, often seen as awkward and detached, with a growing fascination for pain and control. He would later describe this period of his life as the time he first became aware of his desire to kill. Like many serial killers, he had early experiences of torturing animals, and it would grow into fantasizing about abducting and harming people. These dark impulses grew stronger as he reached adolescence, hidden behind a facade of normalcy that would characterize most of his adult life. His family's strict and isolating environment likely prevented Keyes from developing healthy emotional connections, further fueling his desire for power and control over others in place of affection or empathy. At the age of 18, Israel joined the U.S. Army, serving from 1998 to 2001. He was stationed at Fort Lewis in Washington, Fort Hood in Texas, and was deployed to Egypt. To his colleagues, Keyes appeared to be a model soldier, disciplined, reliable, and always ready to follow orders. He earned an Army Achievement Medal for his service, but was known to drink heavily and often spoke of his disdain for the American government, echoing the extremist views he was raised with. Despite his troubling behavior, Keyes remained under the radar, his military career providing him with the structure he needed to maintain his double life before returning to normal society. After leaving the Army, Keyes settled in Nia Bay, Washington, where he would have his first child, a daughter with a woman from the local Mecca tribe. Later, he claimed that having a child would change his perspective on harming, but only in regards to children. To him, everyone else was fair game. During this period, he started his construction business, Keyes Construction, which gave him the perfect cover to travel freely and scout for potential victims. Every section of his life seemed tailored to feed his dark desires, His work took him across the country, providing the opportunity to carry out his meticulously planned crimes without raising suspicion. Keyes' ability to blend in with his surroundings was one of his most terrifying traits. On the surface, he appeared to be a loving father and a hard-working businessman. He maintained relationships, attended community events, and was known by neighbors as quiet and polite. During the interview with the police, he mentions that often he'd carry out murders and hours later spend time with friends as if nothing happened. Beneath this carefully crafted exterior was a calculated predator who thrived on deception and control. He often described himself as having two lives, one that everyone saw and one that no one knew existed. This duality allowed him to commit his crimes without raising suspicions with those close to him, including his family and friends. Another aspect of Keyes' criminal behavior was his complete lack of a victim profile. Unlike many serial killers who target a specific type of victim, Keyes' selection process was entirely opportunistic. He focused instead on the location rather than the person, often traveling great distances to commit his crimes in areas far from his home. He didn't care who, they were just an object for him to fulfill his perverted desires. This nomadic approach made it nearly impossible for law enforcement to connect his crimes, as they occurred from coast to coast with no clear pattern or connection between the victims. He would often bury kill kits in remote locations across the country, containing weapons, cash, and tools needed for abduction, allowing him to act on his impulses with deadly efficiency whenever the opportunity presented itself. He was cold, calculated, and methodical. Keyes' planning extended beyond the logistics of his crimes. He carefully studied law enforcement procedures, ensuring that he left no digital or forensic evidence that could link him to his victims. He paid for everything in cash, avoided security cameras, and used stolen vehicles to avoid detection. His understanding of police methods, combined with his strict personal rules, such as never killing close to home and never using the same method twice, allowed him to remain undetected for years, as the list of his victims continued to grow. That is, until the slip-up with one of his victims that thankfully put authorities on his trail. On the night of February 1st, 2012, 18-year-old Samantha Koenig vanished from her job at Common Grounds, a small coffee kiosk in Anchorage, Alaska. Surveillance footage later revealed the terrifying moments when Samantha was forced at gunpoint by a masked man into the kiosk, ordered to turn off the lights, and eventually abducted. The Anchorage Police Department initiated an immediate investigation, but there were a few initial leads. Keyes had meticulously planned the abduction, carefully avoiding cameras and ensuring that no witnesses were present. He showed her a gun, told her to turn off the lights, then jumped inside before carrying her out to his pickup truck.
It basically looked like someone just literally walked out of their shift.
In the days following Samantha's disappearance, her boyfriend received a series of disturbing text messages from her phone, claiming she was going on vacation and needed time away. However, Samantha's family knew something was terribly wrong. A break in the case came when a ransom note was discovered weeks later, containing a photograph of Samantha holding a newspaper dated after her abduction. The note demanded $30,000 to be deposited into her bank account in exchange for a safe return. Desperate for answers, her father complied, hoping it would lead to his daughter's rescue. However, this was a bold-faced lie, because once Keyes had her phone and debit card, he no longer saw any use of her. Around 2 a.m., the morning after the abduction, Keyes finally moved her from the back of his pickup truck and moved her to his tool shed. He tied her by the neck and left her there to go into his house. After checking on his girlfriend and daughter to make sure they were still asleep, he poured himself a glass of wine and returned to the shed. He told her that he was going to force himself upon her, then strangle her with rope around her neck. He was true to his word and did just that. Bright and early at 5 a.m., he left his house to fly to New Orleans For a 2-week Caribbean cruise he planned with his family. Samantha's lifeless body would remain in his shed. Keyes' decision to keep Samantha's debit card and use it during his travels proved to be a critical mistake, one that would eventually lead to his downfall. But then, how did he fake the ransom photo? It was revealed that he sewed Samantha's eyelids open with fishing line, braided her hair and applied makeup before propping her against the wall. Keyes' use of Samantha's debit card created a digital trail that law enforcement was able to track across multiple states. He made several withdrawals at ATMs in Arizona, New Mexico, and Texas, each time wearing a disguise that obscured his identity, making it difficult to track him except for one fatal mistake. He hid his identity, but not the white Ford Focus captured in the background of the ATM footage. This vehicle became a key piece of evidence, prompting a nationwide alert to be issued. The FBI and local law enforcement agencies worked tirelessly to trace Keyes' movements, checking surveillance footage and cross-referencing travel records to pinpoint his location. On March 13, 2012, a Texas state trooper noticed a white Ford Focus matching the description of the suspect vehicle in a hotel parking lot in Lufkin, Texas. The officer observed a man exiting the hotel, getting into the car, and driving away. The trooper followed Keyes, stopping him for a traffic violation, which provided the probable cause needed to detain him. During the search of his vehicle, authorities discovered Samantha's debit card, her cell phone, a handgun, and a disguise that matched the one seen in the ATM surveillance footage. It was a moment of sheer luck and sharp police instincts that ended Keyes' months-long crime spree and brought him into custody. Following his arrest, Keyes was extradited back to Anchorage, where investigators faced the daunting task of piecing together his story. Despite the overwhelming evidence linking him to Samantha Koenig's abduction, Keyes initially denied involvement. Even before the interview, hints of his narcissistic traits can be seen as he fixes his appearance before the interrogators arrive. During intense questioning, he eventually admitted to not only killing Samantha, but also to other murders, revealing the full extent of his violent double life. Keyes' behavior during these interrogations was often disturbing. He seemed calm and detached as he described the gruesome details of his crimes with chilling nonchalance.
No, the only person I ever shot was Bill Currier.
He also seemed more concerned about people's perceptions of him than about the actual crimes, especially when it came to his family.
My kid's gonna be around. I don't want her to type my name in the computer. I just try to minimize that at this point, I guess.
The FBI, along with Anchorage detectives, quickly realized they were dealing with a highly intelligent and manipulative individual. Keyes was actually aware of the legal system and how to exploit it to his advantage. He used his confessions as a bargaining chip, demanding concessions in exchange for information, including promises of cigars, specific meals, and assurances that his name would not be leaked to the media.
If not, if it's not going the way you want it to, or you're not getting your information fast enough, then do what you gotta do. But I already know you'll be back. So, well, maybe.
Most disturbingly, he requested a swift execution date, hoping to control the narrative and avoid a lengthy trial. His demands placed investigators in a precarious position, as they needed to extract as much information as possible to identify other potential victims without compromising their legal obligations.
He was very specific about some of the details he gave and very vague about others, leading me to believe that he was certainly holding a lot of cards up against his chest.
Over the course of numerous interviews, Keyes confessed to several murders across the country, including the abduction and murder of Bill and Lorraine Currier in Vermont.
Every day that they're not found increases our concern.
Bill and Lorraine Currier, a married couple living in Essex, Vermont, were Israel Keyes' victims in June 2011. Their abduction and murder exemplified Keyes' methodical planning and his ability to operate under the radar. Keyes had flown into Chicago and rented a car to drive to Vermont, bringing with him a kill kit he had buried in the area years prior. The Currier's home was chosen simply because it met his criteria. It had an easily accessible garage, no children, and no dogs.
She never mentioned a name. She just said, this guy, at this point, I'm scared to death of him. It's like he's stalking me.
On the night of June 8, 2011, Keyes cut the phone lines to their house, broke in, and quickly overpowered the couple. He bound them with zip ties and transported them in their own car to an abandoned farmhouse he had discovered earlier that day. At the farmhouse, Keyes separated the couple, attacking Bill first in the basement. Bill fought back, but Keyes shot him multiple times, killing him. Lorraine, restrained upstairs, was not spared. Keyes sexually assaulted her before strangling her to death. He left their bodies in the basement, and the farmhouse was later demolished, and the debris was sent to a landfill, making the remains unrecoverable despite extensive searches. Keyes' confession to the Currier's murders provided a rare glimpse into his thought process. He did not know the couple and had no personal vendetta against them. They were simply in the wrong place at the wrong time, victim of Keyes' desire to kill. The cold, calculated manner in which Keyes executed their abduction and murder left a lasting impact on the Essex community, shattering the sense of safety in the small, tight-knit town. Part of the deal Keyes attempted to make was anonymity in exchange for the information. However, local law enforcement from Vermont were unaware of the serial killer's case and jumped the gun on reporting it.
Police aren't saying much about what they're looking for or what they may have found, but they do say it is about the case of Bill and Lorraine Currier, who've been missing since last June.
Police Chief Brad LaRose sent out a written statement saying that his investigation is just too sensitive to discuss why his team was here and what, if anything, they found.
On top of that, they executed an excavation operation that became public news but ultimately turned up new evidence. This fueled Israel's reticence, since he could not be assured his name would be kept out of the news. He admitted to killing a total of 11 people, but refused to provide their names, locations, or dates, making it difficult for authorities to identify these victims. One such potential victim was Deborah Feldman, a woman who went missing from Hackensack, New Jersey in April 2009. When shown a photograph of Feldman during his interrogation, Keyes' reaction was notably different. He became visibly uncomfortable and refused to elaborate further, a rare departure from his otherwise detached demeanor. Investigators strongly believe that Feldman was one of Keyes' victims, although no forensic evidence has been found to conclusively link him to her disappearance. Keyes also alluded to burying bodies in remote locations, including Washington State Lake's Crescent, a deep glacial lake known for its cold, dark waters. He spoke vaguely of dumping a victim's body in the lake after transporting it there by boat, adding another layer of mystery to his already elusive profile. During this interrogation, he asks questions that strongly indicated.
How long does a body last in a freshwater lake?
Keyes' choice to use remote and difficult disposal sites indicates that there may be numerous victims whose remains will never be found. Lost in the wilderness, the Keyes navigated with the skill of a seasoned outdoorsman. Throughout all of this, he refused to reveal all of his plans in order to retain his bargaining power, claiming,
I know I don't have any rights in this situation. All I have is information. So now you're upset with me that I want to control the information.
He described in detail how he meticulously planned his crimes, often scouting locations months or even years in advance. It was in these interviews that Keyes admitted to burying kill kits in various states, containing weapons, restraints, and cash, which allowed him to commit his murders without leaving a trail. Despite his willingness to talk, Keyes was careful never to reveal too much at once, using his knowledge as leverage to maintain control over the investigation.
If I don't get the information that I need by, I don't know, like I said, the next couple days, then what's going to happen is you're probably going to get an email of a different sort of meeting that we're going to have.
In the end, Keyes' arrogance and his desire to showcase his intelligence led to his downfall. His need to exert control over the investigation was both a strength and a flaw, allowing investigators glimpses into his mind, but ultimately sealing his fate when he miscalculated. Despite his efforts to manipulate the outcome, Keyes could not escape the evidence against him. Keyes' love for travel and his habit of burying kill kits across the country point to the terrifying possibility that his crimes were far more widespread than initially believed. These caches of supplies allowed him to strike at any time without warning and in places far from his home base, making his actions nearly impossible to predict or trace. Investigators continue to comb through missing persons reports and cold cases, hoping to find more connections to Keyes, but the extent of his crimes may never be fully known. Keyes exhibited many traits associated with psychopathy, including a profound lack of empathy, superficial charm, and an inflated sense of self-worth. He was able to describe his crimes in graphic detail without any visible signs of distress, often speaking about his victims as if they were objects rather than human beings. His ability to compartmentalize his actions and his lack of remorse were evident throughout his confessions. Keyes viewed his victims as opportunities, random individuals who happened to cross paths with him at the wrong time. This dehumanization allowed him to commit his crimes without guilt or regret. During his confessions, Keyes often spoke about his crimes with a sense of pride, highlighting his intelligence and cunning. He relished the fact that he had been able to evade detection for so long, seeing himself as superior to those who tried to catch him. This narcissistic trait is common among serial killers, who often view their crimes as evidence of their own cleverness and power. Keyes' disdain for law enforcement and his enjoyment of the psychological game he played with them further underscored his belief in his own superiority. Israel Keyes' psychological profile is ultimately defined by his ability to manipulate those around him, both in life and in death.
Israel Keyes killed himself while in an Alaska prison yesterday.
Before killing himself in an Alaska jail, Keyes confessed to killing people across the country, including 4 here in Washington.
His suicide on December 2012 was not just an escape from facing justice, but also his final act of defiance. By taking his own life, Keyes denied investigators the chance to fully uncover the extent of his crimes, keeping his secrets to the grave. The cryptic suicide note he left behind offered no meaningful insights, only further emphasizing his desire to maintain control until the very end. In his cell, they also recovered drawings of 11 skulls, painted in his own blood. This is thought to allude to his confessions of 11 victims, but with his pattern of manipulative actions, it cannot be sure if 11 was the true number. Keyes' death left many questions unanswered, frustrating law enforcement and leaving the families of his unknown victims without closure.
One of the tragedies that go along with a case like this and a guy like this is that he takes to the grave many of the things that they would love to know. And in a way, it's the ultimate act of cruelty.
A final move by a man who thrived on power and control, ensuring that his story would remain as elusive and mysterious as he had been in life. Israel Keyes' psychological profile paints the picture of a man driven not by impulse or emotion, but by a dark, calculated desire to dominate and deceive. He was a predator in every sense, thriving in the shadows and reveling in his ability to live undetected among those he viewed as inferior. His legacy is a chilling reminder of the danger posed by those who can hide in plain sight, living dual lives with terrifying ease. For now, the investigation is ongoing. What are your thoughts on this case? Do you think his upbringing contributed to his later behaviors? Or was this a case of killer by nature? Feel free to comment in the description below. Also, show some love for our channel by subscribing and giving this video a thumbs up.